Amazing report of the UFO crash of 1865. J.D. Haynes, M.D. reports, General Robert E. Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia to General Ulysses S. Grant, April 9, 1865. The same year, the first crash of an unidentified flying object, a UFO, was reported in the western side of the United States. The eyewitness account, provided by a trapper named James Lumley in present-day Montana, was widely circulated in the newspapers of the day. Lumley's sighting predates the general acceptance of 1947 inauguration of flying saucers in Roswell, New Mexico by over 80 years, making it by far the oldest documented UFO crash. After the 1865 report, sightings of mysterious airships peaked in 1897, 6 years before the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. W. Ritchie Benedict, writing in Fate magazine, reported finding Lumley's story in 2 Canadian newspapers published in 1865. These papers claim to be reprinting a story from the Missouri Democrat entitled The Extraordinary Story, A Meteoric Shower, Crockery Failing from the Sky. Mr. James Lumley, an old Rocky Mountain trapper who has been stopping at the Everett house for several days, makes a most remarkable statement to us, and one which, if authenticated, will produce the greatest excitement in the scientific world. Mr. Lumley states that about the middle of last September, he was engaged in trapping in the mountains about 75 or 100 miles from the Great Falls of the upper Missouri and in the neighborhood of what is known as Cadott Pass. After sunset one evening, he beheld a bright luminous body in the heavens which moved with great rapidity in the easterly direction. Visible for at least 5 seconds, then it suddenly separated into particles, resembling, Mr. Lumley describes it, the bursting of a skyrocket in the air. A few minutes later, he heard a heavy explosion, which jarred the earth perceptibly, and this was shortly followed by a rushing sound, like a tornado sweeping through a forest. A strong wind sprang up about the same time, but suddenly subsided, filling the air with peculiar odors of sulfuric nature. These incidents would make a slight impression on the mind of Mr. Lumley, but for the fact that on the ensuing day he discovered, at the distance of about 2 miles from his camping place, he could see in either direction a wide path had been cut through the forest. Giant trees were uprooted and broke off near the ground, the tops of hills were shaved off, and the earth plowed up in many places. Great and widespread havoc everywhere visible. Following up this track of desolation, he soon ascertained that the cause of it in the shape of an immense stone driven into the side of the mountain. The most remarkable part of the story is an examination of this stone and how it had been divided into compartments. In several places it was carved with hieroglyphics. Mr. Lumley also discovered fragments of a substance resembling glass, and here and there dark stains, as though caused by a liquid. He is confident that the hieroglyphics are the works of human hands, and the stone itself is a fragment of an immense body, which must have been used for some purpose by animated beings. And the article goes on to say, strange as this story appears, Mr. Lumley relates it with so much sincerity that we are forced to accept it as true. It's evident that the stone which he discovered is a fragment of a meteor which was visible in this section last September. The stone will be remembered in Leavenworth, Galena, and in the city by Colonel Bonneville. At Leavenworth, the stone separated into particles and exploded. Astronomers have long held that it is probable that the heavenly bodies are inhabited, even the comets, and it may be that meteors are also. Meteors could be used as conveyance by the inhabitants of other planets exploring space, and it may be that hereafter some future Columbus from Mercury or Uranus may land on this planet by means of a meteoric conveyance and take possession thereof, as did the Spanish navigators of the New World in 1492, and eventually drive what is known as the human race, quote unquote, into a condition of the most abject servitude. There must be a race superior to us, and this may at some future time be demonstrated in the manner we have indicated, end quote. That's the article. Now, while the conclusion of this story may sound quaint, with its reference to aliens traveling through space on comets and meteors, there was the cult of a few years back that committed mass suicide in order to catch a ride on a comet passing near Earth, and there are undoubtedly still believers today. Even though Lumley reported no evidence of survivors, the story implies the possibility. It would seem rather unlikely that a Rocky Mountain trapper would recognize hieroglyphics. It's equally doubtful that an advanced alien civilization would have developed a written language identical to man's hieroglyphs, unless, of course, one accepts the premise that aliens visited visited Egypt, and built the pyramids and gave the natives hieroglyphics. Lumley's account sounds very much like a large meteorite striking the Earth, a bright body moving rapidly through the darkened sky, breaking into particles, jarring the ground on impact, and cutting a path of destruction through the forest before embedding itself in the side of a mountain. Iron meteorites often appear pitted or compartmentalized, as Lumley's story suggests. These pits are due to rust and atmospheric friction. Iron meteorites also may contain sulfur, accounting for the odor described by Lumley. Since meteorites heat up to several thousand degrees as they pass through the Earth's atmosphere, it would not be unusual to find elements in the Earth's surface where the meteorite struck heated enough to form obsidian, a form of natural glass. In an article by Dan Ahrens in 1999, he pointed out that the modern reports of the supposed crash in Missouri are false, and as he states, that old article clearly states that Mr. Lumley was in the upper Missouri, which is of course located in Montana, and that he was 75 to 100 miles up from the Great Falls. This area is exactly where Cadott Pass is located, so his recollection was very good as he reported it. Ahrens also points out the newspaper's erroneous attempt to tie Lumley's meteorite sighting to sightings in Leavenworth and Galena, Kansas. Unfortunately, Mr. Ahrens believes that a craft, rather than a meteorite, crashed at that site. He further encourages the private sector to mount an investigation of the area before, quote, all traces just get whisked off to a government facility somewhere, never to be seen again, end quote. An investigation would be most welcome, as a museum-quality meteorite would be discovered. This would at least disprove the hieroglyphics claim. So what are we making of this incredible tale? Just that, it was a tale, and a tall tale at that. If Lumley witnessed anything, it was undoubtedly an enormous meteorite, but rather than cast aspersions upon Lumley's good name, it was likely a practical joker in the newspaper business that was responsible. Newspapers of the later 19th century could be notoriously unreliable. Some of the first livestock mutilation cases were reported in Kansas in 1897. One incident, complete with a cigar-shaped airship with strange beings aboard that abducted a cow, then dumped the mutilated carcass, turned out to be a hoax propagated by a local liars club, of whom the newspaper editor was a member. I can't believe that. A local liars club. There must have been other liar clubs. And reporters used to make up their stories, to spice up the news. Can you imagine? This is in 1897. Practical jokers abounded during the mysterious airship sightings of 1897, sending lighted kites aloft at night. Today there are so many UFO sightings that it's impossible to explain them all. Even so, it does not increase the likelihood that we have been visited by aliens who communicate with hieroglyphs and travel on meteors. And this is on Solask. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box